So thank you everybody for joining. Today we're going to look at SCOM and ServiceNow. But to start off, I'll just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Bruce Cullen. I'm the Director of Products here at Cookdown, and today with me I have a very special guest. Welcome Anthony Ashmead. You're an enterprise monitoring consultant at Arup. Thank you for joining me today. I guess sort of to get going, what does an enterprise monitoring consultant at Arup do? What's your day-to-day look like?
My main role is to the blurb is kind of help our digital services transition, into mature operating state with analysis and monitoring, standard tool sets and things like that. So that's the consulting part of my role, but the main day job I do at the minute is the SCOM guy, which is
Okay. Everyone needs one.
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you for joining today. We're going to be talking about ServiceNow, in particular how you at Arup monitor ServiceNow, and what sort of issues you guys have seen with ServiceNow and how that looks. So before we kind of get into any of that, let's just sort of understand who Arup are. Rather than have a bunch of words up on screen for this, I figured it would be best to show you. Arup is essentially... they built this. We're looking at Changi Airport in Singapore. You are essentially an architectural engineering firm. This is a snip from your website on kind of what you do. But essentially, think big architectural projects. You guys were involved in the Sydney Opera House, Changi Airport. Think large bridges and football stadiums, and you'll be thinking Arup. So that's who Arup are. Very big company. So I guess more on sort of how you guys are structured. I guess if you could take us through, what's the layout of Arup?
Yeah, sure. So we're based across 44 countries worldwide, which we've just now gone to a sort of new operating model, following some follow the sun support across Americas, EMEA and APAC. We used to have lots and lots of regional support, and we're trying to bring that all into a global operating model for monitoring service transition and all our services go lives.
Okay, makes sense.
Yep.
What sort of workloads are you guys running? What sort of things do you monitor?
So we've got, as it says, on-prem multi-cloud, Azure and AWS primarily. Majority of our sort of web apps and VMs are going into Azure. A lot of our container storage we're doing with Kubernetes and things like that are going into Azure. And then we've got a lot of stuff we're planning to go into Oracle Cloud as well and Google. All of this has been mostly on-prem. We're going through a large cloud migration project at the moment, but due to the old regionalization of everything, we've got lots of existing monitoring tools spread across the globe, as it says, all managed by local teams. We're not trying to stop people using those, but we need to try and find an overarching enterprise tool that can, do it from a service perspective and not just the actual technology underneath.
Yeah, makes total sense. The tool sprawl is very, very common. So is SCOM sort of the main one of those tools, or one of the other ones?
SCOM's the enterprise tool. I mean, SolarWinds has been, I think a lot of people have put a lot of work into doing those over the years. The multiple regions, PA Monitor and things like that are used by the infrastructure teams. And then we've got lots of native tools within VMware, NetApp, etc., things like that. But SCOM, we're trying to make the main sort of data engine for the enterprise monitoring. So we're trying to build that service per service, and that includes then full end-to-end for the F5s, right the way through application stack, front to back end, etc.
Makes sense. So I presume obviously you guys use ServiceNow, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about ServiceNow today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's we've had a massive push on that, a full rebranding of it, a full refresh onto the latest versions, and loads of changes to make it look nice. It's been the real focus over the last 6 months.
Sounds good. Sounds like a very common story. Lots of push for ServiceNow and centralization in all tools. Makes sense. So I guess moving on from there, what sorts of issues were you guys seeing with ServiceNow specifically?
So we've got, I think, our 4 instances that we have. There's 2 in London and 2 in, I think, Amsterdam in North Europe. We were seeing reports of latency, timeouts, sort of slow page loading, and people being able to work in certain parts of Australia, which, ServiceNow are saying that everything's green, that the actual hops within their managed service is all perfect, and it's just a localized issue with our networks wherever we were seeing these latency issues. So we needed to understand really how that was happening, not just monitor ServiceNow, but also have the ability to put sort of places in geolocations that could actually measure those for us above and beyond the actual network monitoring that they've got in place as far as the local bandwidth.
That makes sense. So essentially, ServiceNow is up from an availability perspective, all green. So anything ServiceNow are going to tell you is going to give you nothing of sort of use.
Yeah.
You need to understand kind of like what the experience is that the end users are seeing in all these 44 sites essentially.
Yeah.
And that comes down to the experience you could get, I guess, from SCOM, which is where kind of Cookdown comes into the picture. So from our perspective, we have a free management pack called the ServiceNow Monitoring Management Pack. So we work with you guys on setting this up. We got it all kind of going pretty quickly, and we worked together on implementing a new monitor to help you figure out what was going on with your ServiceNow instance. And that's what we're going to kind of talk a bit more about sort of today. And we're going to sort of officially launch the new management pack, which will be made live after the webinar. What's the management pack, for those of you who aren't sort of aware, is all about this sort of use case where you've got multiple sites connecting to a centralized ServiceNow instance. It could be on-prem ServiceNow, but more than likely it's cloud ServiceNow, as most ServiceNow is cloud. And everything's working fine. ServiceNow is saying, yes, it's green, everything is available, as in your case. But there's some issue in between the end user and ServiceNow in one of these sites, and things are not working. Yet ServiceNow is still showing availability is green, everything is working, and figuring out kind of why that is. So traditionally, you'd go into ServiceNow, have a look at the kind of performance stats, and go, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's green. And try all the other sort of standard troubleshooting steps of, are all your other apps working okay? Is it just ServiceNow? And end up at a kind of impasse where, well, I don't know what's going on here. It must be you, something with your machine. Where in reality, if multiple people at this Melbourne site are seeing the same issue, it's something that isn't availability that we can monitor with SCOM if we have SCOM agents in each of these sites. That's the whole premise of the thing. In sort of implementation, this is what there is to kind of see. So we discover a distributed application in SCOM, a DA, which is what this thing is in the middle. This is our ServiceNow instance, our Cookdown instance. It's underpinned by these two nodes, which are running ServiceNow in the cloud. And you get some cool information about those. We have our watchers set up from SCOM agents in our various sites to keep an eye on ServiceNow from where our users are. And from that, we can get a whole bunch of information. So the new monitors, this is what we worked with yourself, Ash. We worked on a new monitor to monitor connection time. So what this is all about in reality is it's all about at a high level, this monitor, if latency between the watchers and ServiceNow is less than 150 milliseconds round trip, then the monitor returns green by default. Between 150 and 300 milliseconds, amber, and then red over 300 milliseconds. All of this is configurable. And the monitor runs from the watchers essentially rather than from the SCOM management group, although I guess you could set it up to run from the management group too. And we don't by default alert with the monitor, but you can choose to do so, and you can choose whether to alert on warning or degraded, up to you, and you can choose whether alerts should also heal or not, and you can customize the priority and severity of those alerts. Best way to explain this is to have a look at the overrides for them, which is what the screenshot is of, and those are all of the values along with the defaults there. So before we kind of move on, I just wanted to quickly show you this in practice. So if I go to my demo lab and show you the management pack, which is imported now, I have 3 watches, New Orleans, Tokyo and London. London is healthy, Tokyo is in warning state, and New Orleans is in critical state. In reality, these are all actually watches up in our Azure lab, so the actual reality is they're all looking pretty good. So I've overridden the defaults to get it to do this, to show you what's kind of possible. So here we have a really actually good latency here in milliseconds. So I forced it to do this by overriding the defaults. To give you an idea of how this works, let me just go into here and show you the performance monitor in question. This is the guy here, and we'll just have a look at the summary of what we've got set up. Let's look at this one. So in this case, for one of my watches, this is the New Orleans watcher, I've said that the unacceptable threshold is really low. 300 milliseconds is the default, 0.300. So this is 1 millisecond, which is unrealistically low, unless the boxes are literally, everything is on one box, not going to happen. I've chosen to generate an alert when this goes red, and to have my degraded threshold at 2 milliseconds, just to show how this thing works. And that's how it works. To set it up and to actually get it to discover your ServiceNow instance, again, you just override, you create an override in here from whichever machine you would like to be a watcher. So let's have a look at my London one, how it's set up here. So we enable it, we put in the name, the friendly name we'd like to give this watcher. We specify where our ServiceNow instance or instance are located. We can have multiples in here, and we turn it on, and that's all that needs to happen. And then it will go and discover your ServiceNow instance. So if I now go to instances, we can see my ServiceNow instance, which is at cookdown.service-now.com. It's running New York. This is all mined from ServiceNow's API programmatically. We have the build and the database version, which is nice to have information, I guess. We also have information on the nodes underneath here. These are the things that ServiceNow load balance uses between and provide high availability through. We have in here, if I go to my performance view, we have all the performance counters that are available for selection. My demo lab is shut down overnight, so I haven't got a large amount of sort of sensible data to show. The most useful one that I have got data on is if I go to my watches and go into performance view here, and just graph up this guy, you can see where the lab was on yesterday. You can see I shut it down overnight, and where it came back, how it's been performing today. So we had a very small, but as you can see, still low spike in latency here. And that's how this data is kind of natively through SCOM consumed, and how this thing works at a really high level. Just to go back to slides now, to really show the power, I wanted to show you this dashboard. So Ash, this is actually one of your dashboards. So rather than me talk about it, I'll let you do that.
Yep, so we use Squared Up over the top of SCOM to visualize all the data coming out of SCOM, because it does it the best for us. So after the management pack was imported and we did some work to get the custom monitor, we just wanted to give an overview of what our environment looked like. So we used the distributed app that Bruce mentioned earlier, or the enterprise app, yay. And I created a view of that when you actually sort of hover over each item, it becomes drill downable and it's interactive, and it also updates the health states. We've got then the 4 ServiceNow nodes that I mentioned from London and Amsterdam, and then we have the actual watches that are currently configured. What we then did was, using the performance data that he was mentioning, the metrics you get out, created the users and connection fetch time tiles, and added the tile to show the monitors for each of them that are doing a lot more than just the connection time. But the top right tile was key for us, in that allowed us to sort of put a node right within the data center or office of the country or region reporting an issue, and actually get some proper sort of metrics against the actual lead times and the response times. And as you can see there, the Australia ones are normally always red or yellow, which we've got to reevaluate at the time when this was taken, because we got issues with local ISP providers and networks and things like that. So
Right, makes sense.
They look totally different as you can see from sort of London and even the Americas are only sort of in the high 90s.
300 milliseconds is a lot of latency from sort of past lives. That's like halfway around the world style latency.
Yeah.
So it feels like routed via Amsterdam rather than
It's definitely being looked at, and because of this we've been able to sort of visualize it and show the proof, because we also look after the ServiceNow platform in my team as well, so we're pretty stretched, and that's then led to networks doing some discoveries and actually putting their own probes within these locations and verifying that around 300 is probably what we're going to be expecting until the work's done.
Fair enough. And the other thing I didn't pick up on when I was reviewing this earlier, but the number of users, is this per node presumably?
The users, there's a total. I think the two below are the ones per node, and the top one is what we had on at the time of doing this.
So this is potentially helpful when it comes to kind of working around these issues, as these are different. ServiceNow have load balanced these users over multiple nodes. If you've got nodes in different places around the world, there's a potential for ServiceNow to route the traffic more sort of sensibly. The other thing to kind of point out here, not new functionality in the new version of the management pack. It's been there for a while, but from a more sort of availability perspective, we have monitors in there for things like connection refuse, timeouts, host unreachable, DNS failures, etc. A bit more sort of obvious it's all down, but there still could be sort of isolated reasons for these things affecting one site or another. But the new thing is the connection time. Awesome. So all that's really kind of left to say is, so the new version is live now. It's at cookdown.com/ServiceNow-monitoring-MP. And it's a free download, so you can just fill in the form and go and get that now. It's live now. And the other thing that we've added to this new version, this isn't anything to do with Arup. These aren't Arup buildings. This is in fact Orlando. We've added Orlando support as well to this version. So that is live now as well. So all that's left to do is say thank you very much. If you like what you've seen today, you can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook, and obviously via email as well at hello@cookdown.com. So Anthony, thank you very much for joining me today. And
no worries, thanks for having me.
Not at all. And for all your help in getting this new version ready to go.
No worries.
If there are any questions, we'll take them now in the chat. And if not, have a good rest of day, everyone.